Welcome to Delivering Miracles, a podcast to teach women like you tips and strategies on how you can have a safer pregnancy so you can bring home a healthy baby. I'm your host and your high-risk pregnancy expert, Parijat Deshpande. I can't wait to chat with you. Delivering Miracles is a proud member of Parents on Demand, a network of high-quality shows for families like yours and mine. Download the free network app on any Apple and Android devices and listen to your favorite episodes on the go. Before we get started, I wanted to share something really exciting. For the first time ever, there's finally a book specifically for women with high-risk pregnancies and how to manage your stress so you can have a healthy pregnancy even if you've got complications. It's called Pregnancy Brain, and I'm really excited to share it with you. To learn more about the book, head over to pregnancybrainbook.com. That's pregnancybrainbook.com. I can't wait for you to check it out. I love sleep. I love sleep so much. I am just not one of those people that can do without sleep. I like sleep to the point where I'll sacrifice most things just to get some sleep. Like when my son was born and he came home from the NICU, when it came down to it, new parents, especially new mothers, know this. Sometimes it comes down to choosing between eating and sleeping, and my choice was always sleep. I love sleep. I love sleep. But the thing is, sleep is hard to come by when you have a baby. And it's not just because they don't sleep very well, but you've got to teach them to sleep. And as they're learning to sleep, they're not sleeping. And it's just like this crazy madness. I have so many memories of holding my son in the middle of the night literally telling him, "You are so lucky, you're so cute," because I am so tired and I would not be doing this for anybody else in the world. There's just so much that parents don't know about sleep, and it's so overwhelming. And then when you're sleep deprived, everything else just feels so much worse. So we're doing an entire episode on sleep and teaching your children to sleep. And I posted a question to our audience, and I got so many questions back about what you all wanted to know about sleep. So we're just going to jump right in, and we're going to answer all your questions about sleep. So let me introduce one of my favorite people in this world and our guest for today, Susie Parker. She is a certified sleep consultant and founder of Sleep Baby Love Child Sleep Consulting. She's a been there, done that mom of two beautiful girls who have had her deal with many sleep challenges head on. She's been there, guys. She knows how hard it can be, so she really gets it. She's trained in the science of sleep by the Family Sleep Institute, and her blog has become a go-to resource for many parents of littles. And her articles can be found in some of the most visited parenthood sites, including the Huffington Post, Baby Center, and Baby World, just to name a few. Through personalized consulting and online courses, Susie helps many exhausted families teach their babies, toddlers, and preschoolers to love sleep. Oh my gosh, I wish I knew you so many years ago. Welcome, Susie. I'm so glad you're here.
Welcome. So happy to be here too. And you are one of my favorite people as well. Just wanted to put it out there.
Oh, thank you. It's an episode of love today. Okay, so your daughters inspired you to do this work. Tell us how that came to be.
Yes. So for those parents out there that are listening that maybe are struggling, let me just share that it was not my first daughter. My first daughter, I did everything wrong when it came to sleep. So how ironic is that, right? It was my second daughter that was born, and she came out of the womb and with those beady eyes. And I'm just like, why are you not sleeping? Why are you not a sleepy baby? You were just birthed, right? That's what my other daughter did. She fell asleep. And I looked at my husband and I said, we are so screwed. So she had a fear of missing out, FOMO, at such a young age. And she fought sleep like it was her job and made our lives miserable, because what I felt like at the time is I spent all day long trying to get her to sleep and then stay asleep. So it was a really difficult component of my life, but what I did is I researched. So I was holding her with one hand, Googling everything about sleep in the other, and I figured out what worked
Oh my
for
God,
us.
yes.
And so literally, I did have to teach my baby independent sleep skills at 4 months. I sleep trained my baby. As not fun as that was, it was the best thing that could happen to us because she became this amazing textbook sleeper and was a rock star sleeper, and for subsequent years, an amazing sleeper. So I realized, wow, that was such a struggle that I went through. That was just so demoralizing. I felt awful as a parent. I didn't know what to do. There was so much information online, and I had that light bulb moment. Wait, I can help people get through that. So literally, sleep consulting business was born. And 2014, that was when I started my business. And here we are, years later. I really just want to help the parents that are going through exactly what I went through to find their way and to realize that they can be great parents and have great sleepers at the same time. It's not mutually exclusive.
Oh my gosh. And what I love about you, which those of you that are listening will see as we get into the Q&A, what I love about you is your very practical approach to sleep. Like, you're not about cookie cutter approaches and like it has to be this way and just this rigidity that I feel like, because I remember doing the same thing, holding him in one hand and Googling with the other, going, oh my God, what do I do? And reading stuff online going, this is not going to work for this particular kid that I'm starting to learn about and his personality and who he is and all that. And I love that you take such a practical approach. Like, look, this is possible. Let's just get creative and let's make it work. But we can make it work. And I love that about you.
Practical and non-judgmental, because at the end of the day, you don't need someone preaching to you about everything you're doing wrong. You need somebody to help you understand that there's a bright side to the story. And I get that feedback. I get about 1.5 million hits a year to my website, and people are just like, I've read it all and I appreciate that you broke it down for me. So definitely, I appreciate that you mentioned that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of the first things that jumped out at me the first time that we ever talked. And the very first time I was like, oh my gosh, where were you 5 years ago? So, okay, well, let's just get into it because we have so many questions that listeners have sent in that want to get your feedback about this. So we'll just go one at a time. And, if anything else comes up that's outside of the questions, we'll talk about that too. We'll just keep it super light. So the first question that comes in was, how do I get my 6-month-old to nap? We've tried all things and he sleeps 45 minutes and then wakes.
Okay, so 6 months old, your baby is capable of taking a more consolidated nap. So what I like to do is put my detective hat on, and without somebody on the other end answering, I can give you kind of generalities. Number one, a 45-minute nap. Do they have any ability to fall asleep? You're going to hear this a lot today, but this is about independent sleep skills. So if you have a sleep association, and it could be a bottle, nursing, rocking, bouncing, anything that you're doing to get your baby to sleep, they don't have the ability to stay asleep. So what happens is a baby's sleep cycle is typically that 45-minute mark. And you'll see sometimes 40 minutes, sometimes 35, but it's in that range. So what's happening is they're not able to transfer sleep cycles. So you have to do kind of detective work on why. So number one, if your baby can't fall asleep, they can't stay asleep. So we'd want to focus on independent sleep skills. Number two is the timing right. And the timing, unfortunately, we'll need a whole nother episode to get into all the different timing approaches. But, is your baby staying up too late before their nap, or are they going to bed too early before their nap? So those are a different component. Number three, are they napping in the right environment? Light, you guys, affects naps big time. And I can't even tell you, I can give you a real good story about, I looked at a baby's room and they had blackout shades, but what happened is there was a bright light filtering from their blackout shades directly into the baby's face. Well, turn to the opportunity to transfer a sleep cycle, bright light in your face is going to hinder that. So you have to look at kind of the right sleep environment. Is it dark, cool, and quiet?
I love that you said detective work, because that's exactly what it is. Like, it takes the judgment out and it kind of puts you in that place of, what is going on that's keeping my child from being able to go to sleep? And it kind of gives you that power back to say, okay, I can find an answer. So I love that you said that.
Yeah, exactly. And then lastly, I would just say at 6 months, you really want to be focused on 3 naps. Some babies only are taking 2 naps. And if they're 45 minutes, you're not getting over the hump and something's not right in that schedule or loose schedule. And then some parents are doing 4 or 5 of these small, short, I call them crap naps, and you don't want to be doing that. So focus on 3 naps, a morning nap, an afternoon nap, and a cat nap, which is just a bridge.
How long do babies take those 3 naps, and when do they drop down to 2?
Yeah, it's a good question. Somewhere in the 6 to 8 month range, I find 6 months is definitely on the lower end. So if your baby is taking 2-hour great naps, they're probably more capable of a baby that is taking these 45-minute crap naps all day long. So at around 7 to 8
Okay.
months, I find that all of a sudden, either naturally or sometimes it becomes a hot mess, that third nap is skipped. You have difficulty giving it, and then you're just waiting for the opportunity to arise where your baby can tolerate the longer wake times before bedtime. So you always want to be flexible at nighttime, at
Okay.
bedtime. And if you're, not taking that third nap, you probably want to bring in bedtime a little earlier than if you are taking that third nap.
Right. That makes sense. I remember reading a long time ago when we were going through this that you don't want naps to mess with bedtime in either direction. So you don't want them to nap too little so they're too overtired for bedtime, or you don't want them to sleep too much or too close to bedtime so that they don't even fall asleep at night. And I liked that approach too, of remembering like, okay, bedtime is the like golden time. They need to sleep then. And so kind of working backward then and going, all right, when does he need to nap? When does he need to take his 3 or 2 or ultimately 1 nap, and how to space that out? I really like that approach.
And, another key component is you really want to optimize that overnight sleep. So as your baby starts sleeping through the night, and I know that not everyone listening is at that point, if you can get anywhere from 10 to 12 hours of restorative, great overnight sleep without wakings, you're just winning at life than having these short naps that probably aren't getting them over the hump. So if it means a late
So
nap,
true.
I would much rather have an earlier bedtime to get that total amount of sleep.
Yeah, that's exactly what we did. Because man, 10 straight hours, 12 straight hours is like gold. It is so beautiful for everybody. Everyone just wakes up so much happier the next morning when we've got that straight shot. Here's a good question. This is not something that I experienced myself, but I've heard from a lot of friends as a big issue that they don't know how to work around, which is, how do we establish good sleep and nursing habit routines for a baby that nurses on demand?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Number one, nursing on demand, very normal to nurse, whether it's 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours. I mean, I I always made the joke, I just stuck a boob in my kid's mouth all day long. That might have been wrong. Exactly. I do think that if you do have the ability to hold out a little more, and I'm not saying withhold, I'm not saying do anything that is not natural, but if you can get to kind of a structure at some point, even if it's an on-demand feeding here or there, no big deal. But if you can develop the feeding rhythm, the sleep rhythms come a little easier and naturally. So for example, if you wake up from a nap, you do a feeding, you do a little playtime, you go back down for a nap. You'll be on a much better schedule if you're just feeding, playtime, feeding, nap, if that makes sense. Most likely your, goal is eventually to get to the 3 to 4 hour in between feeds. Not to say every baby can do it, especially if they are feeding on demand, but if you can get past the 2 hour, some parents come to me and they're like, we're feeding every 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 50, and it's like for a 6-month-old, that's just not
Oh my
necessarily
goodness.
appropriate at that time. I'd say that nursing is more of a crutch
Right.
versus anything else for comfort versus actual
Comfort nursing. Right. Right, right, right.
cluster feeding leading into bedtime is a totally different animal at 8 weeks versus 4 months, 6 months. So you definitely want to take that.
Well, what I'm hearing you say is also keep in mind the age and the developmental stage of the baby, that some behaviors we're talking about make perfect sense really early on. And as the baby gets older, these are now no longer developmental behaviors, but they're actually just habits that have been created that we have to undo.
And so, typically when it comes to sleep, we're breaking sleep habits, but nursing, during an awake time where they could be playing is another habit as well. Absolutely.
Right. Right. Very interesting. That's very interesting. We had such a different experience because he was a micro preemie. So we were feeding on the dot every 3 hours. We had to wake him up at night. We had to do, I mean, just for his growth. And so this is not something that I had experienced at all. And as I was talking to more friends who had babies down the road, they were like, I don't understand. How do you do feeding and sleep? And many of them actually started co-sleeping or bed sharing as a way to just manage that because they were just so desperate for everybody to get some sleep. Do you have any thoughts about bed sharing and co-sleeping as it pertains to nursing and nursing on demand with sleep?
Yeah, so bed sharing, I'm probably never gonna, you're never gonna hear it from me that, oh, go for it, do it. Just from a safety standpoint, it's just, it's going past my comfort zone.
Yeah.
I was desperate times, in desperate measure in the early months of my baby, and I did bring her into my bed. I did not like that personally because I never felt like I was comfortable because I was always focused on not rolling over on my child. Now, let's talk about what I do promote is
Totally.
room sharing. So room sharing and bed sharing, very, very different. Yes.
So different. I'm so glad you said this.
Yeah, so room sharing is actually encouraged, especially in the beginning. So we literally have the opportunity to have your baby in a pack and play, a bassinet, even, a safe co-sleeper. And co-sleeper is the thing that attaches to your bed, not co-sleeping, just in case that anyone is curious about that. But being able to really have a dedicated sleep space to make sure it's as safe as possible. And the American Academy of Pediatrics used to have the recommendations to keep room sharing to 6 months of age. And then they actually recently changed it to a year of age. I will tell you, as a sleep consultant, I think that
That's
is way
right.
too long.
They won't sleep, right? They'll get distracted by you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's you have to understand where you're at with your baby. Number one, some anxious parents I'm going to follow that recommendation for safety, and here's why. And I'm not here to change your mind. It's a recommendation for a reason, right? To keep our babies safe. What I find is that, post 4 months, being in the same room is actually more distracting for not only the parent, but also the baby. And if nobody's sleeping well, I think that everybody's miserable. So I do encourage when you're starting to sleep train, if ever, that is the time to move your baby from the room. There's circumstances where, the families need to keep their baby in the room and you can be successful sleep training with the room. But I typically always recommend that's the time to move out and get your own dedicated.
What do you recommend then for families who have a small living
Yeah.
space and they don't have a separate room for the baby? And, baby's maybe even not even a baby anymore. He's a toddler or a preschooler and there is no other bedroom.
Yeah, so everyone has their own unique scenarios, right? So we kind of just brainstorm what are the options. If the option is you can't get your baby out of your room or even toddler or preschooler, then that's what you deal with and you make a plan accordingly. So I've worked with parents that keep the baby in the room and they are successful and their lives are changed just as better, the same way that other parents can be. If there is a way that you can put a partition from the baby's, crib, pack and play, whatever they're sleeping in, to your bedroom, it helps minimize that distraction because your baby's going to be like, wait, why are you not responding to me? You're right there. And it does get a little confusing, but absolutely you can be successful. So some parents who have those big, if one bedroom is their only space or they want to keep the baby in the room, even if you have some sort of like a little hallway in a room, and I'm sure you can envision it if I showed it to you, but it might sound a little funny, but anything that you can get your baby out of your eyesight, eye vision, it just is a little easier for everyone involved.
That totally makes sense. So our son, we put him in his own room. We were very just for ourselves. We're like, we need sanity, we need space. So at around 6 months, I think, or 8 months adjusted, we moved him over to his room. And then around when he was about 1 or a little over 1, we all went for the very first time to a hotel. And, hotels I am now seeing are terrible places for families to go with young children because there's no place for anybody to sleep. It's so bad. The only place I loved was Legoland. If anyone has gone, they have created the most genius hotel room layout ever with a wall. So that partition you're talking about, and then bunk beds on the other side of that wall for the kids to sleep. So parents don't have to be, sitting in the dark at 8 p.m. or 7 p.m. or whatever it is. But that one time we went to the hotel, he was just hardly over one, maybe a year and a half. And he was in the pack and play, and we were just sitting on the bed totally in the dark. And he just stood up and looked over and he's like, Daddy, what are you doing? And he just could not go to sleep because of exactly what you said, that they want to know what you're doing. They're curious. They want to know where you are and why aren't they involved in it? And it was so clear to us, like, thank goodness we have his separate room and he's able to sleep there, because I couldn't do this every day.
Oh my God, for sure. And that's funny. I actually stayed in a very similar room. We went to Great Wolf Lodge. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're a national chain, but they had also the sleeping space with the separate bunk beds, and it was genius. But for a baby, I mean, you'd still probably need some sort of independent space too, but hotel sleeping is tough. And my girls are older and we struggle, definitely. Just isn't just Well, just more importantly, it's just so different than their independent sleeping now. And, it's not really fun for any of us, like, to sit in the bedroom. So we're just a fan. We've been doing Airbnbs, condos,
No.
versus a hotel room. And it works for us.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We tried Homewood Suites once by Hilton, where they have actually a bedroom with a door, and then there's a pull-out couch outside. And that worked great for exactly the reason you're talking about. There was a barrier, there was a partition, he had a space, and then we could be in the room with lights on and then doing whatever it is that we needed to do without having to go to bed or trying to create that ideal situation for him to sleep when it was way too early for us to sleep.
Yeah, and speaking of which, I also booked a hotel once and thought we got a junior suite, and just maybe naively, I assumed it had a partition, like French doors or something, and it didn't. And we were like, and so that was like a nightmare. Oh my God, such a nightmare night. We actually left the hotel and drove home. I know.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you. That is one of the things about traveling that I have disliked the most, honestly, is the hotel sleeping. It's just so hard to do with a young kid so far. So I'm totally with you with the Airbnbs and the condos, or some things you kind of recreate that home environment to help them sleep a little bit better. And actually, speaking of this, we have a question about traveling. There's a woman wrote in and said, we love traveling, but our 2-year-old is such a creature of habit and won't sleep anywhere new. Do we sacrifice travel for sleep or sacrifice sleep for travel?
Yes. So remember you said in the beginning, like, oh my God, you have such a practical approach. This is my practical approach. Vacations are important in making memories. So I always say hashtag making memories. So when things are miserable about your vacation, you just always smile and say making memories. At the same time, I say that if it becomes miserable for you, especially if it sacrifices sleep, if your child, like, night after night is like just rebelling and saying, I will not sleep here. No, I don't think at age 2 you need to be touring the world, right? You're more than welcome to wait until age 3, 4, 5 when it becomes a little easier. So enjoy it, but also try to recreate the environment as much as possible. What is it that he really likes? Is it his crib, or is it maybe his own independent space? One of the things that I've done a really good job about with my youngest is I brainwashed her how amazing her crib is. So when we went to a hotel, it was more of a suite. So we had our own little space for her, but we got to bring in a crib. And I was like, oh God, I want to sleep in it so badly. I'm like, how do you get so lucky that you get to be in this amazing crib? And she loved going in it. I mean, she was 4. So this is like, I do a lot of brainwashing. My child was in a crib till 4.5 because I just made it so exciting. And like, I'd be like, no, I'm going in. And I'd like go in and she's like, no, it's mine, that little voice. So at the end of the day, try and figure out what it is that she can or can't sleep in. Is it a bright room? Bring blackout shades or bring garbage bags and tape them up on the wall. Is it, sleeping in a car? I don't expect your child to sleep in a car, so focus on an earlier bedtime if they're just totally a mess. But there is a balance of enjoying it and not enjoying it. And if it's a real miserable experience for all of you, take some time off. Don't make yourself miserable, especially on vacation. And if you do, exactly.
Yeah, because it's supposed to be fun and relaxing. And if it's just a battle every day, then that's completely going against the intention of what you're trying to do.
Love these questions. What else?
Yeah, these are awesome, right? We have so many of them. I'm so glad. And it's something that everybody can relate to. All of us have struggled with sleep at some point. All of us, at some point in the middle of the night, have been Googling like crazy with our crazy eyes, going, oh my God, how do we get over this? So here's one that I can really relate to, which is my preemie needs a lot of sleep, way more than my friends' kids. Is that okay?
I love this question. Yes, it's okay. So number one, you're preemie. You have to think of everything as estimated due date, right? So if your baby is born 6 weeks early, 10 weeks early, you have that extra time where they're out of the womb where they should be sleeping all the time. So in a 24-hour period, don't be surprised if they're sleeping 20 of those 24 hours. And that's a typical newborn. I think that if you see that their sleep is a little more, they're maybe waking up only to feed, maybe they're not fully aroused during feeding, but they're going back down, I would attribute it to being, this is their sleepy time. They're in, they should be in that womb growing and developing and sleeping just like they're doing out of the womb. So think of that as a good thing. We'll also tell you a sleeping baby is a great baby. So there's never an instance that I have, and talk to your doctor, of course, to make sure that this is the case, that it's an okay thing if your baby sleeps more than normal, because there's averages and then there's people that are more high needs with sleep. And as long as your baby is growing and developing and gaining weight and eventually hitting the milestones that a typical age baby would be hitting, I think that that's very normal.
Totally. And I can really speak to this personally. My kiddo, as you all know, who, if you've been listening to this podcast for a little while or following me anywhere, you know, he was a 24-weeker, extremely premature. And to this day, he's a kid who needs more sleep than most of his kids, like most of his friends. He goes to sleep way earlier than them, and he sleeps for much longer through the night. And I know even as a baby, I could tell he needed it, because for him, like, breathing was exhausting. Because of his chronic lung disease, breathing was exhausting and it was taking up a lot of calories. Growing, he had to catch up with that. Developmental milestones, he had to catch up with that. And so I could tell that his little body just needed more rest, and I didn't fight it. I said, great, because I also knew that when he slept well, he was happy and he was playful. And then we were able to do all the things he needed to do to help him catch up developmentally over the years after he came home from the NICU. So I think my guess is it's probably pretty common for preemies to need a lot of sleep and to just go with it.
Absolutely. And I'll take what you just said a step further. I think your son is getting more sleep now because you're encouraging and you're fostering a great sleeping environment. You're focusing on, my child needs sleep and I'm going to give him every opportunity to sleep. Do you know how many other parents at age 5 are like, it's fine if they sleep 8 hours a night? Like, it's summer, let them stay out until 11 o'clock. Yeah. We're good.
Right. No, we're the parents that are like, it's 7 o'clock. Let's run home. It's almost bedtime.
Yeah, because you probably know that your child needs a lot of sleep and there's a consequence if he's not getting it over time.
Exactly. And it goes back to what we were talking about with the traveling question, is at some point when he's not sleeping well, everybody's miserable, because he's not one of those kids that just quietly and happily stays awake and then falls asleep anywhere. He's one of those kids that gets riled up and riled up and riled up and then starts screaming at you because he's so tired. And at that point, all of us are like, why did we do this? And we've tried it a couple times and it's very clear he's just not one of those kids that can tolerate it. So we said, okay, why fight it? This is who you are.
Mm-hmm. So my daughter is 7, and I'd say that this is the first year that I'm seeing that, like, she can handle it a little better. So, she could go to a sleepover and, like, the next day wasn't such a hot mess, where if we could get on track. Yeah. So my 5-year-old is not having that yet. It's the 7. So for anyone out there that's like, when do they stop unraveling? I'd say it's starting around 7.
Okay. Thank you for that reality check. I appreciate that so much.
And, and then again, maybe your son will be 8 or 9. Everyone's a little different, but for my kids, that's what I'm seeing.
Sure. Absolutely. And that's the thing for both my husband and I. Sleep was something we were not going to negotiate. Like and this was a personal choice. This is not a judgment on anybody who's listening if you choose anything differently. But for us, it was, sleep is so important for his growth, for his development, and for his healing after everything he went through in the NICU, that we were going to change our life to make sleep possible for him as much as possible. And given we were on lockdown for 2.5 years, travel wasn't even on the table for so long. So it was a lot easier, I think, for us to do that. But it just got to this point where we think he's got to learn about who he is. And if he's one of those people that just needs sleep, then he's going to have to learn how to work his life as he gets older around the fact that this is what he needs to be healthy. And so that's kind of the approach that we're taking of, yes, it would be a lot more convenient for us if he was able to tolerate staying up a little bit longer and have a little bit more of a buffer. But if that's who he is, then we've got to teach him how to work around that so that he knows how to take care of himself as he gets older, while still giving his body what he needs, while still doing everything that he needs and wants to do in the world.
I was going to say, I love it. Anyone who focuses on sleep, I love. That's great.
I don't know. We're making it up as we go along. Yeah, it just makes everybody happier. So this goes actually really well into the next question, which is, my sister tells me my toddler needs more sleep, but she just seems like a kid who doesn't need a lot of sleep. She can stay up until 9 p.m. and is wide awake and ready for the day at 7. Is this a problem?
Okay, and how old again?
I don't have an actual age, but she said toddler, so I'm guessing 2, 3, maybe.
So let's just give you recommendations for age of how much you can sleep. So when you look at the online, how much, healthykids.org gives you recommendations, it gets really wide at age 2. So like 10 to 14 hours. Like, well, that's a wide range. So what happened with me is I remember when I was dealing with toddler struggles, and I know I shared that my baby struggles are with my youngest daughter, but my toddler struggles were actually with my oldest daughter. And I remember being like, okay, she's so overtired, but okay, she just won't go down. You know what? Hey, we're in that 10-hour range and the internet says it's okay. So I remember being like, okay, it's got to be good. Well, in hindsight, no, absolutely not. 10 hours of sleep for a 2-year-old is not okay at all. I would argue that when I focus on my clients and helping them through toddler sleep challenges and preschoolers, so that's ages, 2 to 5, we are always focusing on at least 12 hours of sleep. And that's at least.
Wow, 12 hours from 2 to 5. That's not what you're reading online at all.
No, exactly, because it's a wide range. So,
wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, I say, well, okay, let's say that your child is going to sleep nicely at 8 and waking up at 7 and not napping and acting like a great person and not having night wakings and not having fits, and you're feeling pretty good at life, then I'd say that works for all of you. But if it's miserable getting your child to sleep at 9, having them wake up at 7, maybe bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, but what might not have been in that statement is they're waking up 3 times a night calling out for you, I can absolutely say with confidence, they're just not sleeping enough. Yeah.
Oh, they're not sleeping enough. That was the really interesting thing that I learned in raising my son, is how opposite kids are from adults, that if they don't get enough sleep, they sleep worse instead of actually sleeping like logs, like we might, just crashing. They actually wake up more and they have a harder time falling asleep. And I had no idea that that's what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll know this feeling because we're going to talk about it and then you're going to be like, that's what she's talking about. Think of you if you go to sleep at a certain time at night. And I'll just speak for me. I go to sleep at 10 o'clock. And sometimes I like watch a late night TV show or, maybe have a late night out and I'm getting in bed at like 11:30. My body is very tingly and I'm restless. And like my legs almost start almost like restless leg syndrome. And I know with that feeling, that is an overtired state. And if you're feeling it that way, your child is feeling it 10 times more than that. So that's what you can equate it to. Your child, number one, struggles to actually find the peace to fall asleep. And then, of course, they're waking up and they get that feeling again. And, oh my God, I need to call out because I need my parents to help me go back to sleep. It's behavioral as well, driven, but it's exacerbated by not getting enough sleep. So we always, first and foremost, when we're trying to fix behavioral, we have to maximize total amount of sleep. I do want to clarify one thing. At age 4 and 5, I try to get as close to 12 hours as possible, but not all 4 and 5-year-olds are going to hit 12 hours. But if they can, great. If they can't, that's okay too. If they're just a little shy of that number.
How do you do that with like school and things? Because my kiddo's 5, right? And he obviously, like we talked about, he needs a ton of sleep. And I know I struggled this year with the how to get that 12 hours when he had to be up by a certain time to get to school, and then to get the 12 hours, he'd basically be sleeping at like 6:30.
Yeah, so that's exactly how to do it. You have to focus on what is your wake up. So, I don't know what your schools are. My schools start at 9. So really you don't need to wake up before 7 or 8 if, I think if your child will sleep in that late, I think that that's a great sign. But you have to work backwards. If your child needs to be up at 7 o'clock every day, you have to work backwards. So you have to literally get everything done. So in your case, if you're coming home from kindergarten, and this is if you know that your child will fall asleep and stay asleep. But literally, you come home from school, you have dinner at
Yeah.
4:30 or 5, or even I'd argue off when they come in the door, you do dinner instead of a snack, and either do a little snack later, but you work on bedtime. So you have to think of all the things that you need to get done. So hopefully, homework is at bay. You don't do these crazy late night activities, which I know a lot of parents do. You know, I do after
Right.
school activities, but I would
Yeah.
never do a 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock activity with a kindergartner. Or
No, definitely not. Definitely not. And I can see for next year, he's not going to be ready for that either. Like his day needs to be done around 5. Like it's just needs to be. He needs time to just chill.
I know. So we're doing that because I have a kindergarten next year, and I'm like, how many is too much? Like this is the first year of kindergarten, and I'm like, well, let's do this number. My husband's like, add another, and I'm like, nope. Well, for fall, no. So it's always encouraged, like really try not to do any activities, especially for the first time into school. But yeah, I mean, preschooler, your day ends probably a
Yeah.
little earlier unless you are in a daycare program. But, by 1 o'clock, there is time that you could do a 3 o'clock activity and still get home. The other component that, always comes down with preschoolers, and I'm struggling with this myself, so it's not something that you need to struggle with alone, is how can you get your child down as quick as possible? So you really need to focus on the bedtime routine and, really set some firm limits about, okay, we're going to read 2 stories. Nope, not 3 stories tonight, 2 stories. And you have to set it, your process and make it really enjoyable and quality, because what happens at this age, at preschooler age or even older or younger, they're looking for attention. So they're not getting it during the day. They're going to be asking for it at night. They're going to be looking for it. So
Yes.
you want to continuously give your child that attention as much as possible in quality, not necessarily quantity.
Which is really hard, I'll say. I totally agree with you because my kiddo is doing the same thing. His new thing is let's talk. Let's talk about things at night instead of reading stories, which I realize is actually not as good for his sleep because then he gets really riled up because we have these conversations about things he's curious about. And so I actually had to turn that down or read a story after. But it's so interesting that that's what they're craving at the same time as parents. Sometimes we are exhausted by that time of day and we're just like, just go to sleep. I don't have time. I don't have energy to talk to you right now. And so how do you balance that when the parents are just so exhausted? Maybe they've had a long day at work or they have other children that have been screaming in their face all day, something like that. And the kid needs attention and they just don't have the energy for it.
Yeah, so I think that you just have to look at it like, my husband would say this, put on your big boy pants, like, right? Just get through it. Don't skimp, because if you skimp, your child is going to take 10 times longer to fall asleep because they're going to jump out of bed, they're going to look for you, they're going to, throw a
So
fit, they're
true.
going to scream and cry, they're going to do anything. So just give it your all at the end of the day and just say, okay, I'm almost off the clock. I'm almost off the clock. And look to fill it up. So I think that that's really the component of it. So if you can get that routine down, maybe 20 minutes max, you're probably like, that's probably good enough time where it's enough time with your child and it's enough time where you can be like, okay, I'm done, right? Versus, yeah, like versus 5 minutes. And some parents
Yeah.
have a
You can do
5 minute
20 minutes.
routine and
20
it's
minutes is not a
amazing and it
problem.
works for them. And I'm like, amazing if your child is not fighting it. But I do find that If it is just like, okay, good night, go to sleep, it's go to sleep, stop coming out, go to sleep, no more hugs, go to sleep, like, so you're spending
Yeah.
that time where you could be
Right.
just having a really enjoyable bedtime routine.
I love that. And I love that it encourages that bonding time, even if it's just for 15, 20 minutes. It's so special for both of you, even at the end of the day, even when you're exhausted. It's just such a special moment in the day. So we're going to rewind back and go back to the newborn phase. There's a question about, am I supposed to try and get a baby into a sleep pattern straight away after birth?
Great question. I would love the answer to be yes, but it's probably not. The answer is like, you're in crazy town sleepland, with a newborn, right? So your baby goes from sleeping all day and then all of a sudden they're partying all night.
Yeah.
That's your first sleep challenge that you might deal with. They might be like waking up and having this awful nighttime routine. So like just screaming hysterically from 7 to 10 o'clock for no reason. You might experience that. But what I am trying to say to you guys, there's no rhyme or reason, right? So you're just going to have like totally false expectations and hope if you say, I'm going to like totally get this kid sleeping independently day one, right? That being said, I would say that you kind of need to lower expectations for newborn sleep and try and get off on the best foot forward by teaching independent sleep skills. And I'm not saying withhold, feedings. I'm not saying not bond with your baby or attach or hold your baby. But to the extent that you one time a day get your baby completely falling asleep on their own, you are setting the stage of good sleep habit. And if your baby can do that all the time, you're not going to have any sleep habits to break. So you can either think of it right away to the extent that you can, or you can think of it after 2 months of age. So 2 months of age, you're hopefully past that fussy period if your baby has it. Your baby then is capable of falling asleep independently and then literally just giving them the space. I'm not talking about sleep training. I'm not talking about leaving them to cry, but I do think that if you can give a couple minutes of independent skills of not just rushing in to put a pacifier in or hold your baby every time they make a peep, you're just setting yourself up for more success.
Love that. It's a very empowering approach to how to approach that. It's very realistic that they're not going to be sleeping on their own from day one. It's not possible, not how they're set up, but it is possible to do some things to set them up for success going forward. My question kind of as a follow-up to that is it really true you hear that you can't spoil the baby by holding them to sleep for the first 3 months of their life? Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, I really believe that, like, don't worry about bad sleep habits in the beginning, right? So 3 months is what you just said. I would say 2 months is a guide, just as you do what you got to do. What happened in my case is that my baby had no independent sleep skills and I did what I got to do until 4 months. And I just kicked the can. I didn't even try to focus on these independent sleep skills. Like I didn't even try to set the stage because I said, at 4 months of age, I'm going to sleep train my baby. And that meant teaching independent skills. So I got rid of a rock and play, a swaddle, a pacifier, and took her into the crib for the first time ever. And guess what? She learned how to do it. Like we think that's impossible. It can happen. So you either, have the approach like I did, said, I'll deal with it later, or I'm not going to break sleep habits because I'm not going to have. So after 3 months of age or 2 months, whatever you're comfortable with, I'm going to start setting these foundations by teaching these skills, but doing it in a way that I'm comfortable with. And that doesn't mean sleep training or letting your baby cry it out.
So what is the difference then between teaching these skills versus sleep training or cry it out?
Yeah, so sleep training to me is the actual plan of working on independent sleep skills. So, working on independent sleep skills as a foundation means, okay, I'm going to put my baby down and I'm going to see what she does. Okay, well, 2 minutes later, she starts crying. Okay, I'm going to go to her, I'm going to shush her, I'm going to pick her up, I'm going to try again. Okay, I'm going to be on the side of the room. Okay, I'm going to go back to her. I'm going to shush her. I'm going to do all these things. And then 10 minutes later, you know what? Today it wasn't the nap. I'm going to just rock her to sleep or wear her, get her to sleep another way. So this is setting the stage of, okay, I'm going to do things like loosely. So 10 minutes is a good number that I like to work on, especially for young babies. After 4 months of age, if you're in, I'm working on setting you up for success so they learn how to fall asleep no matter how long it takes, using the approach that works for the family.
What's your opinion on cry it out?
Yeah, so cry it out means very different things to different people, right? So I use cry it out as what's called extinction to me, which means you say, I love you, and you're not going back in. Very few of my clients start there, right? Because it's a very overwhelming feel. And of course, I would never want my baby to be alone. Nobody wants to do it, right? Until they know that, okay, I'm helping my baby learn these independent sleep skills by giving checks, by picking her up, by doing all these various things, and it's not helping. So you have to, and I help my clients figure this out as well and give them really specific directions. But by understanding, is it in your child's best interest to let my baby figure it out, for a very period of time, or let me be a help. So if I'm helping and sitting with my baby or picking her up or checking on her, that's what you have to decide on your own.
That's so great. I'm glad you explained that, because the term cried out it's such an inflammatory phrase, I think, now. And it's a very polarizing word. And I think what it does is it takes away the reminder that we have choices in how we teach our children to sleep, and that we can create it and make it what it needs to be for our particular child. And I'm assuming will probably be different for each child that you have, because everybody has different needs. And I like that you brought that in to kind of say, well, let's essentially saying, let's figure out what's going to work for this child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And make that work.
Absolutely. And it's exactly what you said. It's polarizing. There's a lot of scare tactics on the internet that, like, oh my God, your baby should be held for, countless years of age. And it's a parenting's first right to be miserable and sleep deprived. And there's all these things out there that makes parents question themselves. But if you look at it, things differently, is, wow, I'm teaching my child how to fall asleep. I'm teaching my child to be independent. I'm teaching my child that sleep is important to our family and that we are going to promote good sleep habits. So if you're thinking about everything in the positive, the method of teaching your baby independent sleep skills is just a component of it.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I love that. That is amazing. That is so, so good. We have so many questions, and this has already gone so long. So I think we'll do just two more, and then we're probably just going to have you back on to keep talking about this. We just have so many people who are soaking up all your wisdom. So we'll end on two more. One is, what are your tips for new working moms on how to deal with the dreaded sleep regressions?
All right, so new working moms. So I'm going to make some assumptions that you're back at work 3 months, 4 months of age. So, maybe the 4-month sleep regression, that might be the first one. The 8-month sleep regression, that might be another one. So let's just talk really quickly about sleep regressions as a whole. Sleep regressions sometimes there's a lot going on developmentally and physically with your baby. So sometimes these changes are actually going to take a dip in sleep. So your baby who's sleeping 7 hours all of a sudden is being back to sleeping, waking up every 2 hours, for example. So regressions are typically, what I find, little opportunities, wake-up calls to focus on sleep. So, if you have a baby at, let's just say, 8 months of age, as a working mom, you get home at 6, you feed your baby, put her down at 7, and she was sleeping till 3 a.m., and then you were doing another feed, and then all of a sudden she was sleeping at 7. If you have an 8-month-old at this component, I'd say, well, does your baby need to be eating at night? And we would talk through that. But does your baby have the independent sleep skills? And a lot of times parents mask regressions for, but it was working. So a regression sometimes that's not necessarily a regression. That just means, well, your baby actually doesn't.
That's not actually and a regression doesn't last very long, right? So if it goes on for more than a week or two, it's not a regression anymore.
Exactly. It's not a regression anymore. So I would focus first and foremost on those independent sleep skills. So I would say great news is that your baby was sleeping amazing. Even when they didn't know how to fall asleep, they could stay asleep. So now we have to focus on the independent sleep skills first and foremost. And then, and I never want to make someone feel bad. Like, okay, that they're pointing their finger at a regression. Sure, I'll buy into the regression, but I know it's something else. Teething is another big one. I'll tell you guys out there, your baby's going to be teething for years. So you cannot point your finger solely at teeth, right? Like, a- and I was the first, oh my God, my baby's cranky. She's teething. She's teething. Well, you guys, my baby was not teething. And if she was, that was not the excuse. I just had a cranky baby and she was overtired and I was using the excuse of teething. Now, there are teeth. Teeth will come through. Teeth may cause discomfort for your baby. But what I find is that if your baby knows how to fall asleep and stay asleep, your baby's teething symptoms are going to be minimized. It's when the baby doesn't fall asleep and requires the mom or dad or any caregiver to actually help them fall asleep. That's when the teething's exacerbated. And that's when you blame teeth for 3 years. So if ever,
Which makes sense, right? Like for us too, if we don't sleep very well, our pain gets worse. So it makes sense it would happen for the babies also.
exactly. So, give a little pain reliever. Make sure that you as a parent feel comforted that your child is feeling good and, do what you got to do, whether it's being responsive to your baby or saying, my baby has to go to sleep. So helping your baby fall asleep, but ultimately remembering that your baby has independent sleep skills and you don't want to go back to square one because your baby is teething.
Right. And you bring up such a great point too, is if you invest in establishing these habits and teaching these skills ahead of time, we found too with our son that once we did that, the regressions or the teething, whatever those phases were, he was able to get back to his old habits really quickly when that phase was over.
Absolutely. That's absolutely. And that's why I never want to point fingers at teething. And then of course developmental regressions. If it's not a week or two later, you got to look at something else.
Yeah, totally. Which another reason why I wish I'd known you, because his being a preemie, he had a lot of catch up growth. And so his regressions were actually very different than a typical full term kid's regressions. And some of them were a little bit longer, but I could tell that it was a regression because he'd have these like crazy eyes and you could see something was happening mentally that was just so different than when he was just not sleeping. And then after it was over, 2-3 weeks later, he'd be like suddenly caught up in some kind of skill that we've been working on in physical therapy or occupational therapy or something like that. But then it had gone on for so long, like 2-3 weeks, that we had developed these terrible habits. And we were all just like, oh my gosh, how do we undo this? How do we undo this? And it was a long time before we figured out, oh, if we actually just set up the habits really early, then going back to the beginning after this is over is so much easier. So I totally get anyone who's listening about how hard it is. I totally get it. We were there up in the middle of the night going, why are you not sleeping? What's going on? What do we do? What are we doing wrong?
Yeah. And feel free to use my analogy. Number one, a problem is not a problem until it's a problem, right? So I think of night wakings as the problem, right? You don't want to be up in the middle of the night, especially after you've gotten that taste of sleeping through the night. I'm exhausted when I am up randomly in the middle of the night now. Like, I don't know how people do it.
Oh my goodness.
So
yeah.
The other thing that I do with my child's sleep, and now my girls are getting older, so pretty soon I'm going to be even out of the phase that I would even help them. Like they'd go to, some more of a sleep specialist if ever there was an issue. But I do always say that I thought of sleep as this big ship in the ocean. And we rocked from side to side and we got battered sometimes by the waves, but I never let my boat tip over. And I never let my child come into my bed. I never said it's okay to completely throw sleep out the window forever. It was something that I just know how hard it is to fix sleep habits. I just never let them get too far off. So, and I as a parent have dealt with, parenting struggles but sleep is the one thing I got on track. Like that is the one thing I don't mess with.
Yes.
My kids might eat air.
Yeah. Exactly.
We're not doing great in the food department, but my kids sleep because that's my thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm totally with you. That was it for us too. We're not messing with sleep. Sleep's got to happen. He's got to be sleeping. Totally. So the last question that we'll talk about today, which is a really great one, is what do you think about melatonin? Should I give it to my preschooler who just won't sleep at night?
That was a good one. Well, this is
Right? I feel like this comes up a lot now. A lot of pediatricians are recommending melatonin for like 4 or 5-year-olds who are just having a hard time going to sleep.
So until you can show me a long-term study that says giving melatonin to our children is safe and not, going to cause our children to have a third head, for example, I'm just not on board with it. I don't think that there's enough long-term questions. So what I have heard is maybe there's questions that it's going to affect, puberty and all these things that it's like, I don't know that I'm comfortable ever recommending something like that. It's basically taking something natural that's producing in our body and then, supplementing it. That being said, I do think pediatricians are recommending it a lot. And it's scary to me because I'm like, wait, why? If this is a behavioral problem, why do you want to deal with melatonin? It's also over the counter. It's easy to access. So I just say no go. And I think, a lot of people like me who aren't comfortable with it are just the unknowns about it. It's just not something that I'm ready to get behind unless I saw something that really was positive, and I have yet to see that. So the great news is I've worked with clients and they have been on melatonin for years, which is really scary. And it's not habit forming. So they were able to get off cold turkey. So that was good news. And we focused just on behavior.
That's great.
And so that's the good news. And if there was some sort of sleep tragedy, like, so for example, overseas trip, something that you are desperate to get back on track, I would say a day, max 2 days, if you needed to use it or you had it and you wanted to use it, but I wouldn't recommend using it for a crutch because that's what it is. And what I do find also is that there are parents who use it might help them fall asleep, but it doesn't help them stay asleep. So then you have to deal with it. So I'd say focus on the behavioral aspects of sleep is going to be a little better result long term.
So for the parent who wrote this in, or for anybody who is resonating with this question, you're suggesting then say no to melatonin now and really take that investigative approach, going all the way back to the beginning of this episode, really investigate and figure out what is going on. Why is this child having trouble falling asleep? Are they overtired? Are they eating enough? Is there pain? Is there something else going on? And really investigate to figure out what the problem might be and try to address it from that perspective. Is that what you would recommend?
I would. And then I'd stay a step further with the toddlers and preschoolers. You really have to get a good plan ahead of time. So at this age, unlike babies, you can get your child involved. As a parent, you can do anything you're comfortable doing, but you need to have a plan and consistency behind it. So, for example, you can say, great news, mommy and daddy are going to have you sleep better, and here's how we're going to do it, X, Y, and Z. I believe at this age, you throw the book at them, you get them involved, you role play, you really help understand what's going to happen. So what happens when you get out of bed? What's going to happen? What is mommy and daddy going to do? And your child, if you position it in a positive way, they're going to understand, and your commitment to doing what you're going to say is going to really get the results. So, if you say, I'm not going to give you another story when you ask for it, you can't give another story. And I have
that consistency.
Exactly. And I have a whole course related to this. This is something that parents struggle with, and they need that. They have to get outside of their own head. So I give the options and say, here are your options, and here's how you're going to do it. And here's not what you're going to deviate, because you're going to have a really solid plan. And here's how you're going to be consistent. And once they commit to being consistent and know that it's hard and know that it's okay if their child is upset and know that they don't need to solve everything, every opportunity, every tier for their child, if you give them that space and that consistency, things really will change behaviorally.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I so believe in everything you're saying. I've seen it work with my kiddo, and I'm just so glad that you came on to share so much wisdom. I'm sorry we couldn't get through all the questions. We will have you back on to go through more. For those of you that are listening, I think Susie says it so perfectly. A problem isn't a problem until it's a problem. And the best way to prevent bad habits is by setting up sleep skills from the beginning. And we can all do that. It's amazing. Susie, before we wrap up, what are your final words of hope for new parents who are listening in and are trying to get their kids to sleep?
Yeah, I think it's just the testimonials on my site. Literally, you guys, life-changing results when you focus on sleep. You don't win an award by being sleep deprived. You just don't. So there's no need, if you're miserable, if your child is miserable, that you need to stay in that state. And there is hope. And it's literally life changing when you get your child sleeping.
Absolutely. So where can people find you if they want more information or they want to work with you to help them get their child to sleep?
I would love that to go to sleepbabylove.com and you'll see a ton of resources. I have a great blog just for informational purposes, and then you'll see where you could actually work with me one-on-one.
Wonderful. And we will have that link in the show notes. So if you're driving, if you're on the treadmill, whatever you are, you don't have to write it down. It will be right there for you to click and access Susie's wonderful brain for more wisdom about your particular situation. Thank you, Susie, for being here today. This was amazing.
Loved being with you and chatting, as always.
As always. Thank you. Thank you. Oh man, this was so eye-opening. Even though I'm not in that phase anymore, the things I wish I had known. What I love, and this is why I asked her to be on this podcast, because what I love about her approach, and I hope that you're taking away from this, is that even if you have the so-called terrible sleeper or this kid that's allergic to sleep, I'm doing these quotes, air quotes, you can't see me, but I'm doing them anyway. You've got this, even if you've got this baby who seems to hate sleeping, you can still do something about it. And I think that if you listen to Delivering Miracles, that is what this podcast is all about. What can we do in the face of the hardest circumstances possible? And not sleeping is a terrible circumstance. Everything feels harder. Pain gets worse, and we're all on edge, and we're all crabby, and just everything just feels awful. And we don't get to enjoy parenting this brand new human that we brought into this world and who we're so excited about. So I love that she takes this approach. I hope that's what you take away from this, is there is hope. There are things that you can do. This is not going to be forever, but this is also not a phase you want to just kind of wait for it to pass. Be active, take an active role, and do something about it. As she says, a problem isn't a problem until it's a problem, but you can prevent bad habits by setting up sleep skills from the beginning. And that's just so awesome. And I love that. And I hope that's what you take away from today. Thank you so much for joining me here. And if you enjoyed today's episode, I would love it if you can head over to Apple Podcasts by iTunes and leave a review so more women who are trying to figure out this parenting thing after infertility, high-risk pregnancy, prematurity, or anything else, they'll know about Delivering Miracles. They can tune in and receive the advice and tips and inspiration on how to get through this maze called life and family building and parenting. And if you are experiencing pregnancy complications right now and you're worried about your baby, especially if you've got another kiddo or 2 or 3 at home, check out Pregnancy Brain, a mind-body approach to stress management during a high-risk pregnancy. It will help you, it will save your sanity, and it will help you have a healthier pregnancy. So you can get your copy in Kindle format or on paperback on Amazon or barnesandnoble.com. Also, as always, I would love to stay in touch. So follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and Pinterest at Parijat Desh. That's PARIJATDESH. Come on over and say hello. I would love to hear from you. Sleep is a wonderful thing. Sleep is so nice. It is so good. It feels good. And it's really good for all of us. And there's so much that you can do to help you and your family sleep well again. It's so possible. And there's so much help outside and available if you're not able to do it on your own. Wishing you lots of good nights of sleep. Take it one day, one step at a time. You can do this.